So let's look at the basic elements of design, and I'm going to list them here for you. And you can follow along in your handout if you like, or you can look at it later. Let's start with shape. Line. Texture. Value, or some people call it tone. Color. Many of us think that color is the most important one, and for some people it is, but actually it's not as important as you'd think. Space and edge. So here we have 7 most salient elements of design. Depending on the artist that you talk to or the teacher that you have or instructor, they might have additional ones or even ones that they switch out for these. But these are the most basic ones that we're going to be talking about for the purposes of this course, because in some ways they can also apply metaphorically to our art and to our life. So remember, these aren't rules, they're just guidelines. And having guidelines sometimes can be helpful, but that doesn't mean that you can't apply your own aesthetic and choice to what you decide to choose and how do you choose to go about it. So what we're trying to do when we study guidelines is really finding a way of creating balance. So hopefully by now in the first few exercises, you've been able to let loose and experiment and just have fun, and you weren't aiming for a goal, it didn't matter, right? But now I want to start us to use a little bit of our left brain. Again, we've kind of asked it to take a back seat and let the right brain kind of have its way. But I think now it's going to be helpful to bring it back online a little bit. Not to take over, but just to give us its opinion once in a while, so that we can add a little structure to what we're doing. So creating balance in art can also mimic creating balance in life, and we'll see how these two relate as we go along. I'm sure you've all heard of all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. In order for us to have a satisfying piece of art, as well as a satisfying piece of life, we have to have a good balance, right? Of enjoying our days and having fun and play, with also assuming responsibilities. So one thing we know is that our brains tend to get bored pretty easily. And we know that it likes novelty. In order to make us feel a bit of joy or feel alive, it needs to feel something different. And I think that's probably why when we eat a totally different food that we've never tried before, or we go on vacation, we tend to find it easier to have fun or to relax. And obviously our time is ours, so there's a lot of reasons that go into it. But one reason is that it's novelty, especially if we go to places that we've never been to before. And so our brain likes something that it hasn't seen. Another way to say it is it likes contrast. So if we apply that to art, we need to, in the art that we're creating, look at it, evaluate it, and say to ourselves, does this piece of art in front of me have enough contrast? Or is it too much of the same thing? Are the values all too much alike? Are the shapes too much alike? When that happens, the brain kind of just checks out, right? It looks at the piece and says, it's boring, it doesn't interest me, it doesn't captivate my attention. Things that engage our attention, and again, this is subjective in life and in art, and that's why each individual has to practice finding their own balance. But here's the guideline. You want to have a certain amount of contrast. Now, whether you're going to have contrast in shape, in lines, in texture, in value, in color, in space, or in edges, that's what you have to decide, right? It's not something, in my opinion, the way I go about it, to decide when you're starting the piece. You want to be able to start your piece cathartically and joyfully, knowing that you're going to be adding layers to the piece, right? More than likely, the finished product is never going to be your first layer. You might have pieces of that first layer showing through, peeking through, but it's over time, as you start to notice what feels good and what you do like, that the painting starts to evolve. And that's true for life as well. So could it be a painting just about variety of shape? Yep, we could do that. Could it be a painting that just focuses on lines? We could do that too. And there's plenty of examples on the internet that you could, look up yourself and find different professional artists that are out there that focus on just one of these areas at a time. But more often than not, it's a blend of all of them. And if the next time that you look at, a famous painting like Monet, Van Gogh, whoever your favorite painters are, evaluate their work and notice that it's not just a scene. It's not just any old abstract painting. If you really evaluate it, they also paid attention to creating a balance within the painting. That doesn't mean that that's how they started, but eventually you get to the point where you want to bring your left brain back online, to correct it, to buff it up, to shine it up, to evaluate it. But initially you want to feel joy when you're doing it, because if you're just coming from a place of being technically accurate and following the rules, the viewer will feel that. They'll look at the painting and feel that it's not engaging, it's not authentic. They feel that you're holding back. So that's why I suggest that you start off your first few layers with just pure catharsis and pure joy, and don't worry about it. And then as time goes on, you start to clip things back, and you start to evaluate and say, well, how does this need to change? And that's true in life too. Okay, so then we have to decide what is balance, right? Because for me, something that I do might look pretty boring to you, right? I might use soft colors and minimal, varieties of shapes. And for someone else, that might not be very invigorating. And then I might also do something that looks quite chaotic, to you, but to me, it looks good. So balance is really a personal choice. It's doing things that come from the heart and then applying the guidelines that you choose to apply in the quantity that you want to apply them in. And that's how you create your own authentic, satisfying piece of art, whether it's photography, music, gardening, interior design, or whether you're looking at your life. So creating balance is subjective, right? And guidelines are not rules, because it all depends on our personalities, on our experiences, and each moment in time. Even creating balance today, this year for me, next year may look very chaotic. I have paintings that one day I think look great, and then I wake up the next morning and I think, ooh, what's bothering me about that painting? Sometimes it's the lighting that changes, sometimes it's the weather that changes. I mean, everything affects both our art and our life. And that doesn't mean that we can't make choices and decisions, because over time we'll notice the pattern of what tends to please us more often than not. And it's just as important to learn what brings us joy, what makes us feel alive, as it is to learn what doesn't last very long and ends up being a fad, and what doesn't, what brings us sadness and makes us feel hollow and doesn't make us feel alive. So we want to take all of those elements of design and get them to know them superficially, right? Like I said, they're guidelines, they're not rules. And then we want to think about them as we look at the overall composition of the painting, the piece of music, the garden, even a recipe. It applies to all of those things, right? You want to make sure that the composition is varied enough, but not chaotic. We can look at it as being on a continuum. So we start off with boring. There's not much going on. Calm. We got a few more elements of design. Interesting. Vibrant. Loud. And chaotic. Right? So you can go anywhere from a boring painting to a chaotic painting. And the same is true for life, right? We can go from having a dull life which sometimes can even equal depression, right? To a chaotic life where it almost feels like, you could be bipolar or PTSD, any other conditions where anxiety tends to be more prevalent. So dullness in life would be more associated with a tendency towards depression, whereas chaos tends to be more associated with anxiety. Let me just put that here. Now, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. Again, this is all personal, based on personal choice. Extremes tend not to be healthy, right? And tend not to be enjoyable, unless that's your intention with a piece of art, that you're trying to create a stir in someone else's feelings. It's different. But in life, usually extremes are not healthy. So we want to stay somewhere in here and avoid boring or chaotic or depression or anxiety. And that's where we have to find our balance. So how these painting exercises can help you evaluate your life as well is that as you're painting, as you're evaluating your choices, as you're analyzing what's before you, and you look at it and you say, is this pleasing me? So now we're going beyond the initial experience, right? You might have had fun with it, and that's great because we want that to happen, especially in the first layer or two. But then you want to get to a point where you actually observe it visually and you look at it and you say, is this pleasing to me? Am I satisfied? And so at that point, we want to bring our left brain online and we want to say, what's missing in this painting? What do I have too much of in this painting? Is it too heavy on the left and too light on the right? Does it have too many lines and it looks messy and chaotic? how can I bring balance to it? And this is true whether you're doing realistic paintings or whether you're doing abstract paintings. So this course is obviously not a course that's going to teach you how to be an incredible artist. That's not what this is about. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube that I encourage you to browse and pick your favorite instructors. I've also included some in the extra materials and the bonus resources if you want to go down there and look. That's what that's there for you to do. And that could be a jump start for you, for people that haven't done art and need some more instruction. That's fine. For the sake of this course, I just want to give you a little bit of information so that you can start thinking about how to apply it to the art that you're working on, but also how to see how that's a metaphor for your life as well. Okay, so if you missed it in the beginning, don't forget there's the download to the right of the video that says download. If you press on it and then open the download and hit print, you can print it out and then you can take notes. It's a brief handout, but I think it has enough information that doesn't overwhelm you, and it will help you and guide you. Okay, so I wanted to show you how, even with realistic paintings, here's one of vacation that I took to the Caribbean, and I took a photograph, and this is based out of a photograph. Now, for me, I enjoy doing these. It's more of a left brain exercise, which can be fun too sometimes. But if you notice, when I take a photograph, I'm always practicing composition. I want to learn composition through the photograph so then I can apply it to the painting. Now, the waters are gorgeous in the Caribbean, as most of you know, and I could have just focused on the waters, right? But then it would have just been a blue painting. So I made sure to incorporate the stone, which is heavier and it's a different color, it's a warm color, and the greens, right, that contrast nicely against the brown. And also, and then you have the contrast against the blue water. And here you have a lot of texture, whether it's the stone or the greens, and then the blue water is nice and smooth. So that's what I mean about lines. So this contrast here with lines, not just with color, but also with texture and with lines. If we look at shapes, we have some smaller shapes of clouds, and then we have big clouds. We have some darker, heavier pieces of land, and then we have some hazy ones out in the distance, right? Because those are further away and they're smaller. So this creates interest. Now, what would happen if I didn't put that part of the tree, you do it this way, in the corner? It's not as interesting a painting. It looks too divided in half, where this is all light and this is all dark. But then I added that piece and it makes it more interesting. It's almost like a little vignette, a window that you created to gaze out into it. Here's another one. This is actually on the Cape, photograph I took of my son when he was probably 7, and my husband who was in the water fishing. And I don't know if you can see that as far away, but so obviously the image in the water is much smaller. My son is closer and he's bigger. But you also have, with color, we have contrast, right? We have the muted colors of the sand. This was at sunset. So we have the warm hues of the sand, but then you have the vibrant, sparkling sun rays that are touching the water. And so that's a contrast. You also have line work, and then you just have shapes that are solid. So that's another contrast. And you have the bigger person and the smaller person. You have the shimmers that are more obvious and they're close up and bigger, and then you have the smaller shimmers out in the distance. And contrast makes a painting more interesting. Now, you may think that this is no big deal. To me, it's heartwarming because it's personal. I happen to love this painting. There's really not much going on here, but I can feel the serenity in it because I can see my son was enjoying, playing with the shells. And so it's a reminder to me of that moment, and it was very peaceful. So it depends what you're trying to convey. And that's true in your art as it is in your life. Are you trying to increase the amount of stillness and calm and peace in your life? Or are you trying to create more vitality and movement in your life? And again, it's about balance, and it's personal to everyone. So those are realistic. If you look at abstracts, this is an abstract painting that I actually did this week. I didn't have anything in mind. I wasn't, visualizing anything. It was just catharsis, and these were the strokes that I was feeling that felt good to me. These are the colors that appealed to me this week. And so I have these bigger shapes with darker greens and mixtures of some grays that contrast up against the green. And then I have the grays up here with some line work, some green line work. And that adds contrast. Especially in abstract painting, composition becomes even more important because you have to create it yourself. It has to come from inside, right? You're not just looking at, a scenery and deciding, gee, I want that tree in the picture and I want that stone in the picture, where the shapes are already there for you. It's just about you finding the view that's more appealing, right? Composition is there for you to find. When you're working on an abstract painting, if you want to actually finish one and put one on the wall, it's actually much harder to do because you have to develop all of it. You have to figure out what are the shapes, what are the lines, what colors are you going to use, and you have to create balance from the start, from scratch. Sometimes, you hear people, even a child could do that. And I got to tell you, I love some children's work. They're beautiful because they're so carefree. But when you're talking about professional level, which I'm not at that level, but if you're talking about the professional level, it's actually pretty difficult to attain a really good painting. But so this is an example of an abstract painting. And then you ask yourself, so even if you're not into abstracts, I'm going to show you a few different ones. I want you to ask yourself which one I'm showing you, which one do you like better? So let me bring this closer to you. So there's this one. And then we have this one. And this one. So again, even if you don't like abstract paintings and you're just doing the abstract paintings for this course as a mode of healing and catharsis, I want you to ask yourself which one of those paintings you liked better, and then ask yourself why. See if you can answer that question, because that might give you a clue as to what you might enjoy in a painting. So remember, this week's lesson is about helping you to find balance, to learn some guidelines, but to remember that they're not rules and that you can apply your desires and choose what's important to you and what's not, and what makes you feel alive and what doesn't. And try to apply what you learn with your art this week, metaphorically to your life.